Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. I'm sorry that we've kept you waiting a little longer than usual. That's been the result of some technical difficulties. More importantly, I think I should apologise at once for my absence from the hearing room this morning. I'm afraid that on Thursday evening I tested positive for COVID and have been suffering mild symptoms since then. Of course, it would be irresponsible to return to work until I'm confident that I'm not infectious. However, I think it's important that we don't interrupt the evidence if that can be avoided, and I'm glad to say that I feel well enough to take part in the proceedings. The other members of the panel who are with you and counsel are all satisfied that it's possible for them to continue with me presiding remotely. That might require a few modifications to our usual procedure, but I'm sure that I can rely on the cooperation of everyone involved to enable the hearing to run smoothly. Today we are due to hear further evidence from Mr. Brian Martin, formerly of DCLG. So I'm going to ask Mr. Millett at this stage to invite Mr. Martin back into the hearing room.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, can we please have Mr. Martin back in the hearing room now?
Good morning, Mr. Martin. I'm sorry that I'm not able to be sitting in the hearing room with you this morning. I have explained to the other people in the room and to the people watching that I'm afraid I tested positive for COVID at the end of last week, so I'm not able to come in person, but we are satisfied that we can continue with the hearing and avoid interrupting your evidence if I take part remotely. So I'm sorry if it seems a rather strange arrangement, but that's what we plan to do. What I must do, of course, is check that you can see me and hear me clearly. Can you?
I can, sir, yes.
Good. Thank you very much. Well, in that case, I'll invite Mr. Millett to continue with his questioning. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you, and good morning to you, members of the panel. Mr. Martin, good morning to you. On Thursday, we were just about to start looking at the literature review in 2000. Can I ask you to look at that, please? That is at BRE 401353. This is the first page of the document run, which is a letter dated the 30th of March 2000 from Sarah Colwell to Mick Payne. If we go to page 4, we can see the start of the report itself. You can see there that the report is dated the 30th of March 2000, and it's written or prepared by Sarah Colwell, J. Foster, and B. Martin. You see that?
Yes.
And it's signed off by Dr. Debbie Smith the same date. What was your role in this literature review report?
I'm not sure I can remember with any great accuracy, but my contribution to the project was to help with building regulations related issues.
Buildings regulation related issues. Do you remember which parts of the report you took the lead on?
No.
But can we take it that the topic areas that you researched and wrote about were, as you put it, buildings regulation related?
Yes.
Right. Now, if we look at page 7 of the review, please, at the top paragraph on that page, we can see the purpose of the paper, which is to identify and summarise the three things. First, the types of external cladding systems currently in use. Second, the current requirements and guidance as given in approved document B 2000 revision. And third, the research previously undertaken on external fire spread in buildings. And now, this is a 25-page report, and I'm not going to go through it with you in its entirety. But can we take it that on the basis of your last answer about your role, you are at least involved in identifying and summarising the second bullet point contents there, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Now, if we go please to page 14, we can see in the first paragraph there that it says this, and this is about the fire performance of external cladding systems. It says, irrespective of boundary distance, Diagram 40, provisions for external surfaces of walls, in ADB restricts the combustibility of external walls of high buildings where the top floor is at least 18 metres above ground level, and those of the assembly and recreation purpose group to reduce the danger from fire spread up the external face of the building. Now, in her oral evidence to the inquiry, Dr. Colwell said that you had written the ADB passages in the literature review, and that included this one I've just read to you. Is that right?
I don't remember, but it seems likely.
Right. Now, looking at those 4 lines, do you consider what is written there to be correct?
It's a very high-level summary.
Well, I want to focus on the words restricts the combustibility. Diagram 40 restricts the combustibility. If we look at diagram 40 of the then approved document B, that's at CLG 16012, please, page 90. Looking at it, I'm assuming that you're familiar with this. This is the 2000 version, published in July 2000, so after after March 2000. But can you explain, how does diagram 40 of approved document B here restrict the combustibility of external surfaces of walls of buildings with a story over 18 metres?
Probably depends how you use the term combustibility, and I think probably as I've got older and wiser, I probably would have been more pedantic with the use of that word. I think at the time I would have been using it in terms of restricting the reaction to fire performance of a material is probably a more correct term to use.
Right. I mean, I think, therefore, on that answer, can we agree, first, that the requirement in diagram 40 is for national class naught, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, and national class naught isn't anything to do with combustibility, is it?
Depends what you mean by combustibility.
Well, if you're talking about reaction to fire in the broad sense, that's one thing. But if you're talking about combustibility, which has a specific and understood meaning within ADB, you're talking about another, aren't you?
I think you may be overstating the difference. My understanding of the term combustibility is a term that's used to describe how combustible something is, as opposed to a binary term, whether something is or isn't combustible. It probably depends whether you're referring to the definition of non-combustible materials or the general term combustibility, which is how combustible something is, which is more of a sliding scale. As I say, I think probably today I would be more cautious with the language I used.
Well, national class naught isn't about sliding scales, is it? It's not about degrees of combustibility, is it?
I think it is.
Why do you think it is?
Because there are 2 tests which look at how readily a material reacts with a fire.
Well, there are 2 tests, aren't there? We've been through this, part 6 and part 7, one of which tells you about propagation of fire, and the other tells you about surface spread of flame. They're not combustibility tests, are they? Part 11 was a combustibility test. If you wanted to know
it's a non-combustibility test.
Well, what's that?
It tests whether something meets a definition of non-combustibility.
I don't think I've ever heard of a non-combustibility test, Mr. Martin. Are you able to tell us what that is?
It's a test to see whether something meets a definition of non-combustible.
What's the definition of non-combustible?
It's the one that's set out in the standard.
Well, A1?
That's the European classification.
What's the UK?
Can't remember off the top of my head, but it'll be set out in, I think, in part 11.
Part 11? Part 11 of?
PS 476. I think so, from the top of my head.
Yes, I don't think that's... I mean, we can look at it, and I'm not going to fence with you now about whether that's right or wrong, but it's not 476 part 6 or 7, is it? They've got nothing to do with combustibility, except in the lay sense. The person in the street might think that.
I'm not sure I agree.
Well, Anthony Bird told us that the use of the word combustible was, and I'm quoting, a basic mistake Yes, and it doesn't actually capture the rest of the content in what was section 13 of the approved document. Now, do you accept that it is a basic mistake, as Anthony Bird told the inquiry it was?
I'm not sure that I do. I think a more precise form of words could have been used, which would have been better at describing the way the guidance works.
But why were you using words that were not precise in a document that had been authored by 3 people and approved by Dr. Debbie Smith, coming from the BRE and advising government? Why was there any room for this slackness, this imprecision?
I don't think it was deliberate.
Well, in which case, so what? It was an accident, was it? An oversight?
I guess you could call it that, yes.
Well, I'm not guessing. I would like to know precisely whether you actually really understood the difference between combustibility on the one hand and what it is that Class 0, by way of testing, comprises on the other. I'd like to know whether you really understood that back in 2000, or whether you were using it in a loose, lay sense.
I think I was probably using it in a more lay sense at the time. I can't remember exactly what was going through my mind at that time.
Is it possible that, in fact, as you just say, that there was some confusion in your own mind at the time about National Class 0 and the difference between that classification and the concept of combustibility?
I'm not sure I would have had an issue with the use of the term at the time. I think combustibility to me is a sliding scale of performance for materials.
Well, is it possible that, in fact, that the confusion wasn't limited to you, to be fair, and there was widespread confusion within the BRE at the time about the difference between combustibility on the one hand and what Class 0 designates or identifies on the other?
I'm not sure I could answer that for BRE as a whole.
Now, we can see who's co-authored this with you, Dr. Colwell, and we can see that it was checked and approved by Debbie Smith and submitted to the department. Did Dr. Smith ever come back to you and correct you on any aspect of your work in relation to this report before it went out?
I don't remember.
You don't remember. If we get back to page 14, please, of the literature review, top of the paragraph, you can also see something else here, because it says that diagram 40 restricts the combustibility of external walls of high buildings. That's not right, is it? Because it only applies to the external surfaces of walls, as the title to diagram 40 says, not the whole of the external wall. That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And that's another error, isn't it?
Yes, I would accept that. I think that's, again, it's an attempt at summary and does become inaccurate as a result.
But as the person in charge of ADB and ensuring that the government understood how ADB worked with some precision, are you able to explain how these two errors, the use of the word combustibility there, and external walls immediately after it, crept into this paragraph?
So I think at the time I was trying to summarise, and I think I've probably over-summarised and lost some of the accuracy.
Right. Let's go to page 11, please. There's a heading at the foot of the page, cladding materials, and then if we turn the page, please, to page 12, there's another heading underneath that, facade costs, and underneath that, in tables 1, 2 and 3, which runs over to page 13, there are what are described as the typical costs, as you can see, typical costs associated with different cladding systems based on figures given in the Architects' Journal, AJ, in February 1998. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, if we scroll down to page 13 and look at table 3, in the fourth row there we can see it says this: composite panel of 0.5 millimetres stove lacquered aluminium, 3 millimetres polyethylene core, 0.5 millimetres mill finish aluminium with insulation and vapour barrier bonded to rear face. Now that's ACM with a PE core, isn't it, for want of a better expression?
Yes.
Yes. Now, were you aware before co-writing this report that ACM panels with a polyethylene core were in use in the external wall arrangements of UK buildings above 18 metres?
No.
You weren't. Was it a surprise then to you that this was being listed by the Architects Journal as perhaps a typical product?
At the time, I don't think I'd noticed it in this table.
Even though it was in a report you co-authored? How come?
I guess at the time I probably didn't read it, or if I did, I probably read it, skimmed over those bits that I wasn't responsible for.
Right. So can we take it from that answer that you weren't responsible for this part of the report, at least?
As far as I can remember, I don't remember doing this.
But did you not read it in its entirety before you allowed it to go out with your name on it?
I can't remember. I doubt it.
Why?
My recollection is that I drafted some paragraphs to summarise what was in the building regulations and probably handed them on to Dr. Colwell.
Right.
I may or may not have read the whole report at the time. I don't remember.
I mean, it's not a very long report. It's only 29 pages, including the rear part. I mean, is there any reason why you wouldn't have read it all? It's a report from the BRE going to government, a place where you worked half the week. You might be asked questions about it by your boss when it came in. Was there any reason why you weren't fully familiar with it and ready to answer questions on it if asked?
Probably because I was busy doing other things. I'm sorry, it sounds really glib, but I don't remember paying an awful lot of attention to this particular piece of work.
Right. Okay. What did you know at the time, March 2000, about the reaction to fire properties of, well, let me put it more broadly so as to help you, the fire properties of polyethylene?
I think at the time this was drafted.
Yes, March 2000.
I imagine I would have known that as a plastic material, it was likely to be combustible.
And if turning to the question of compliance with the guidance in approved document B, would there have been any particular reason for concern in finding that these types of panels were being used to clad high-rise buildings?
At that time, I probably wouldn't have known.
You probably wouldn't have known, but there would. My question was, would there have been any reason for concern? If you had known that polyethylene was being used within a panel to clad buildings above 18 metres, what would you have thought?
So I'm trying to think back to what I knew then and what I would have understood, which is very difficult given what I know now.
Well, let's try it differently. Supposing you had read this document as a thorough and conscientious person whose name it was going out in, looked at Table 3 and read what I've read to you from the penultimate entry there. And you'll have seen 3mm polyethylene core. What would you have thought?
I think I would have recognised that there was a polymer material in the cladding system and sought to find out more about its fire performance. Right.
Now, would it be right that if these were genuinely Class 0 panels, the composite panel as described there, then as a matter of regulation and guidance, they could be used on or as part of the external wall build-up of buildings over 20 metres, in fact, at the time, and 18 metres from July 2000?
As a Class O, assuming they were Class O, I would have recognised that met with the guidance in the approved document. I may have asked myself the question as to whether it met the functional requirement or not.
Yes. What would the answer have been?
At that time, I think I would have needed to look into it.
Yes. Did it occur to you at the time, and before any experimental testing took place, as we know it did the following year, that the use of polyethylene at height above 18 metres, or even 20 at this time, might present a serious danger in the event of fire?
Did it occur to me?
Yes.
No.
Was there any discussion within the BRE or within the department on that topic at about this time?
Not that I recall, no.
Right. Did you give any consideration, apart from the provisions of approved document B, to whether or not the use of polyethylene in the external wall build-up of a high-rise building would, or in fact could ever, comply with the functional requirements of B4 of the building regulations?
At that time, no, we didn't consider it.
Didn't. Can you explain why not? Can you explain how it can come about that the Architects' Journal is providing this panel as, let it be assumed, a typical panel for use in buildings, and it's the fact that it had a combustible core passed you by and appears, as you would have put it, passed the VRE by when considering the functional requirement?
I don't recall seeing this table at the time, and in the drafting of this report, I don't think this was something that we discussed.
Right.
Nobody picked up on it.
So can we take it then that you didn't consider, one way or the other, whether there were circumstances in which external cladding materials containing polyethylene could ever adequately resist the spread of fire over the walls?
At the stage of drafting this report, it's not something that I was aware of.
Right. And therefore, can we also take it, I think the answer is yes, but can we also take it, tell me if this is wrong, that at the time it never struck you, and so far as you could see nobody at the BRE, that there might be a fundamental problem with the statutory guidance which did not restrict the use of polyethylene core panels at height, provided that they obtained Class 0?
This is quite early stages of this project, and I think at that time that wasn't a conversation that I'd had with anybody.
Right. Let's go to page 27 and the conclusions of this literature review. If we look at the second conclusion on the page there, and please could we have that expanded? Thank you. It says this: the 2000 revision of ADB goes some way to addressing the issues of fire performance of external cladding systems. The review of BR 135 will help to clarify any remaining issues as identified. Now, can I take it that, given your role in this report, you were responsible for coming to that conclusion and drafting paragraph 2?
I imagine that was a joint effort, but
Right.
I can't remember who drafted what.
All right, but you would have contributed at least to the thinking and the writing, yes?
I believe so, yes.
Right. Now, the reference there to the 2000 revision of ADB, is that the version that came into force a few months later, in the July of 2000?
Must have been, yes.
Yeah, it must have been, yeah, but the previous one is 1992, so that's logical.
Yes.
Yes. Now, which issues, therefore, specifically in relation to the fire performance of external cladding systems, had the 2000 revision of approved document B, quotes, gone some way to addressing, close quotes?
I think that's the revision where there was an introduction of a requirement for Class O to apply on the internal surface
Right.
of a cladding panel.
I see. But the requirements for external surfaces in both versions are that the external walls of a building over a certain height, 20 metres, then down to 18 in 2000, should meet the provisions of diagram 40, yes?
Yes.
Yes. And those versions both stipulate Class 0, yes?
Yes.
The only difference, I think, is that in the 1992 version it was 20 metres, and in the 2000 version it was 18. It came down by 2 metres. Yes?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yes. Now, for insulation, a slightly different topic, I think it's right, isn't it, that the 1992 version, and we can look at it if you need to, required insulation in the external wall construction of buildings over 20 metres, to be materials of limited combustibility. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. But in 2000, the approved document only called for insulation to be of limited combustibility in ventilated cavities in the external wall construction of buildings over 18 metres. Yes? So there was that change. Now, isn't that, or wasn't that, a reduction of the circumstances in which the guidance asked for insulation to be of limited combustibility?
I think you're correct, yes.
Yes, it goes from insulation in the external wall construction to insulation in ventilated cavities in the external wall construction. Correct. And the functional requirement had also changed, hadn't it, between 1992 and 2000? Do you remember how?
This is the introduction of the word adequate.
It is indeed, yes. That's right. Do you understand that to be anything other than a relaxation of the requirement?
The introduction of the word adequate?
Yes.
I think it was intended to have no material effect.
It may have been intended to have no material effect, but did you understand it at the time, at least to present the risk of being seen as having an intended effect, namely a relaxation of the requirement?
No.
And we'll come back to the word adequate later in your evidence. If we look at the third conclusion on page 27, the work to date suggests that a large-scale test method is necessary to assess the performance of the complete system. Was that your own opinion at the time?
That was the view of BRE at the time. So Dr. Colwell, who'd been working in this area for a while, set out that was the opinion of the organisation, was that the large-scale test was the best option, and I had no reason to disagree with that.
Right, so you had no reason to disagree with it. So can we take it that you shared the BRE opinion that is set out?
I probably didn't know enough about the subject at the time to argue for or against.
Did you not? Had you read Fire Note 9?
By then I probably had.
Right. Let's go then back to the project itself. Now, we saw from the bid document, and you may recall this, and we can look at it again if you like, Mr. Martin, but the BRE was to undertake a survey of current stock and industry practice in relation to the cladding of high-rise buildings in the United Kingdom, wasn't it?
Yes.
And in fact, again, I showed you this on Thursday afternoon, but you'll remember that the Select Committee had recommended in their 14th of December 1999 report that a full survey be carried out, hadn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Was that ever discussed as a possibility, either at the BRE or at government at the time?
Only insofar as it was considered something that should be included in this contract.
Right, okay. Now, we know that there was a questionnaire compiled for completion by a selected number of local authorities, and we have the questionnaire. Let's just have that up, please. It's BRE 30418885, and if we go to it, we can see the questions. It's 6 pages long, but if we just scroll through it, it's an external cladding survey questionnaire, and question 4, you've got age groups, and then the numbers of buildings where external cladding was installed by way of percentage. Page 2, you can see generic cladding types rendered, and rain screen there is the second one. Page 3, there's the other two, infill and built up, and installation under paragraph 8, mineral fibre or polymeric core. And then if you turn the page to page 4, you can see that the questionnaire goes on of the polymerics. It identifies PIR and phenolics, and then fire stopping at 9. And then page 5, you can see there's a question, have you had any, this is question 11, have you had any incidents involving fire spread due to external cladding systems? Any details would be appreciated. Now, do you remember this questionnaire?
Yes.
You do. Sarah Colwell told us that she'd prepared it and run it past you at the time. Is that right?
It seems likely. I don't remember.
Right. Now, we know that the BRE created an Excel spreadsheet to record the responses to the survey, and Sarah Colwell's evidence to the inquiry was that you took the lead in analysing those responses. She told us that at day 232, page 54, at lines 13 to 23. Is she right about that?
I don't remember.
Let's look at the native version of that document, please. BRE 30s41886. And if we look at the first tab, I'm sorry, let's wait for it to come up. Thank you. There it is. And if we look at the first tab, introduction, we can see that it records just over halfway down the text, under the words to date, it says 45 surveys were distributed, 17 responses have been received. Of these, 3 were nil returns, 1 is still trying to provide the data, 13 full returns were provided. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, do you know why only 45 questionnaires were sent out in total?
I can't remember.
Do you know who took that decision?
No.
Do you know what discussions led to the decision to send out only 45 questionnaires?
No, I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Do you remember any involvement of Anthony Bird in that?
I can only offer conjecture, which is that it's the sort of thing that you'd expect the contractor and the client to agree.
Right, but you were on both sides, weren't you? You were at the contractor and at the client, so do you not remember how that got agreed?
If it was a discussion about a contract, I wouldn't have been
Right.
representing the department.
Can you tell us who chose the list of recipients or on what basis they were chosen?
No, I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Right, let's see how far you can help us. Can we go to column C, please? To the sheet entitled Survey Responses. And if you go in that, please, you can see the responses of W.S. Atkins on the leftmost column under column C. You see? W.S.
Yes.
Atkins. Now, do you know what kind of organisation W.S. Atkins was?
It's a multidisciplinary engineering company, I think.
Right. Now, they're listed as type 1, which means specifier. And if we go down to row 54, if we scroll down to row 54, we can see what their response to question 11 was. And you'll remember from the questionnaire that 11 was about incidents, experience of incidents. And their question is answer yes. You see that? And then there's a note added to the cell. If we can open the note, we can probably see some of it. And it reads, you may have to take this from me because we can't demonstrate it with this technology, but it says BRE, spread of flames generally rapid due to loss of integrity of composite aluminium panels using combustible cores. You can see part of that. Assuming that is a note of what was recorded on W.S. Atkins' survey response, do you know who would have typed that into this spreadsheet?
I don't remember it. I don't remember it at all.
No, you may not remember it precisely, but as a matter of system, would it have been you taking the lead on collating the responses and then inputting them into this spreadsheet? If you'd taken the lead, then can we take it that you would have done that or not?
I don't even remember producing this spreadsheet, so I can't comment on that. I don't recognise it at all.
All right. Did you or anybody else contact W.S. Atkins to discover what the composite aluminium panels using combustible cores were?
No, I wish we had.
Well, of course.
If someone did, I'd no recollection of it.
Do you remember whether this spreadsheet was sent to the department or whether it was or remained an internal BRE document?
I'm sorry, I can't help.
I mean, if it's right that if Sarah Colwell is right and you'd taken the lead on compiling the survey responses, it would follow that you would have, at the time, seen that response and collated it into this document. That must follow, mustn't it? Whether you can remember it now or not.
If that's true, but I don't remember it at all.
All right. Let's go to page 2. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Let's go, please, to BRE 30s41887, which is a document entitled Survey Summary and Options Report, prepared for A. Bird in the DETR, dated 24th July 2000. And if we turn to page 2 of that, you can see that it's a report prepared by Sarah Colwell for Anthony Bird, signed off by Dr. Debbie Smith, dated the 24th of July 2000. Do you remember what role you had in relation to this report?
No.
If we go to page 6, please, we can see the survey responses towards the bottom of the page. Can you see that? There's a heading, and it says 45 questionnaires were issued. Of these, 17 responses were received. Figure 1 summarises the categories and responses received. The number of responses received were less than expected. And in fact, if you go to BRE 3041886, the previous document in number, we can see that there were only 13 full responses. We saw that from the introduction, I think, on Thursday. You can see them across the page. Do you know why the BRE didn't issue further surveys to other organisations when it became clear that the response rate was so low, 13 out of 45?
I think what happened is that the contract would have been for BRE to send out an agreed number of questionnaires. So to do any more work would have required renegotiation with the department.
And was there any?
It's very difficult to be certain, but my recollection is the department had the option of carrying out a more detailed survey and decided not to.
Right. As you say the department, of course you were there 2.5 days a week on average. Were you party to, or did you hear anything about that, the discussions that led to that decision?
Not that I can remember. It would have been a conversation amongst the sort of officials in the department.
Can you tell us how it could be that the BRE and government could gain a proper and comprehensive understanding of the current industry practice in relation to the overcladding of high-rise building stock in the UK when you only had 13 responses to a 45-item survey?
It's clearly not sufficient to give you a good understanding of what's happening in the industry. Right. But I think the decision at the time was not to commit more resources to trying to get a better view.
But why would it have required more resources? I mean, it's just a question of just making sure you had a larger spread of distribution. Send out the same document to more authorities.
Well, that would have cost time and money, so someone would have needed to pay for it.
Well, time and money, not really. It's just a question of sending an email or licking envelopes and putting a stamp on it, no?
Well, that's not free.
No, it's not free, but, well, all right. When this report was submitted to the department, did anybody from the department suggest to the BRE that perhaps more data than 17 responses was needed and that more surveys should be sent out?
So I never vague recollection of a decision being made that not to put more resource into this.
Right. And that decision would have come to you, presumably, from or through Anthony Bird?
I expect so, yes.
And he was your line manager at the time. Did you have any other source of information?
I was still working at BRE then, so he wouldn't have been my line manager.
You were working 2 days a week. This is now 2000, July 2000. You were working, I think, 2.5 days a week, or 2 to 3 days a week at the department, and 2 to 3 days a week at the BRE.
Yes.
Yes. And at the department, he would have been your line manager when there, effectively.
Yeah, it would have been the person I reported to.
Right.
Yeah.
Fine. That will do. Then if we go to page 10 of this document, we can see there's a heading third down on the page. So sorry, BRE 3041887 again. Thank you. Survey conclusions. And if you look at the first bullet point, it says this. Based on this survey, it would appear that although the number of responses have been limited, they provide sufficient data to form a consistent view of the types of external cladding systems used in the public housing sector. Now, on what basis did you understand that that conclusion had been reached?
I can't answer that question, sorry.
Oh, did you see this report at the time, do you think?
I don't remember seeing it, but it seems likely that I would have been aware of it.
Yeah. And if we look at the responses from local authorities, We can see those on page 7. There's a figure 1. And if you look at the red columns returned, you can see the numbers. And the local authorities are England 5, Scotland 3, Wales 1, suppliers 4. You can see the figures there. So, and one of those in Scotland was a nil return. So England, Scotland and Wales is a total of 8. And it's acknowledged in the report that some of the information might be duplicated. We get that from page 7. I don't need to show you that. Would you accept that that is very far from a comprehensive survey of the UK building stock proposed by the Select Committee and indeed proposed in revision 2 of the bid for this contract that we saw last week?
Yes.
Yes. Why was it so woefully incomprehensive?
I think from experience, these sorts of surveys are often very unsuccessful. There's nothing to compel the building owners and local authorities to respond to them, so you're relying on the goodwill of the people that you're seeking information from. And again, from the experience over the last 4 years, it's clear that quite a lot of building owners aren't really aware of the construction of the buildings they're responsible for.
So when you refer to experience, this is experience that you've had after July 2000, not before it?
Yes, yeah, this was the first time I'd been involved in any kind of project like this.
Right. Well, let's move on then to the experimental testing programme in 2001. If we stick with this document, please, and go to page 12, we can see there are 2 design options for a full-scale test to be carried out. And under the heading Option 1, towards the foot of your screen, it says Fire Note 9, and it reads as follows. From the information provided in the survey, and in order to address the trend towards increasing thermal and acoustic performance in the residential housing market, the following experimental programme is proposed. This option does not provide any indication of the performance of built-up systems or preformed insulation panels. The tests would be carried out in accordance with BRE Fire Note 9, using the existing test facility at BRE Cardington. System Type 1, U-value equivalent to proposed draft BR 262 guide requirements. And then I'll read the rest to you. Set 1, rendered systems, no fire barriers, standard fixing. And then there are 3 tests, mineral fibre, expanded polystyrene insulation, and phenolic foam insulation. And then repeat with fire barriers. And then over the page, if we go to that System Type 2, equivalent U-value for System Type 1, Set 2, ventilated rain screen system, no fire barriers, and then there are 4 tests. Metal-faced panel on metal rail, mineral fibre insulation. Test 2, non-combustible panel on wooden battens, mineral fibre insulation. Test 3, Class 0 panel on metal rails, mineral fibre insulation. Test 4, Class 0 panel on wooden batten, mineral fibre insulation. Repeat, Set 2, Tests 3 and 4, that's the Class 0 tests, with fire barriers, and then there's a price. And you can see that.
Yes.
What was your role in relation to this test programme generally?
I don't think I had very much to do with it.
Really? Nothing very much to do with it? Right. I mean, let's take that in stages then. Did you contribute to the discussions about what was to be tested?
I don't think so.
Did you see this list of proposed tests as set out in this document? Presumably you did, because it's part of the report that was sent to Mr. Bird.
Yeah, I would have been generally aware of it, yes.
What was your understanding about how the various components were chosen? Do you know?
I can't remember if I had anything to do with that. I certainly don't remember.
Right. Do you know what the technical or practical rationale was for choosing these products or cladding configurations?
No.
Right. Were you not consulted at all about the makeup of these tests with an eye to making sure that they could be adequately reflected in the regulation or in the approved document?
I don't think so, no.
Now, it's the case, as we know from the documents and other witnesses, that a total of 14 full-scale tests were carried out, with a 3rd set of tests on composite panel systems. Can you take that from me, or would you quarrel with that?
Happy to accept that.
Yeah. Do you know why a total of 14 scale tests were carried out?
No.
Do you know how the testing programme that was eventually undertaken was decided on?
Not for sure, but I assume it would have been a discussion between Dr. Colwell and the department, and would have been run past the advisory group probably.
Do you know whether the ultimate programme was decided before the testing began, or whether it changed as the experimental programme evolved, or as it ran?
I don't know, but it's not unusual to change as you work through a programme.
Now, I mean, we know that you were one of the authors, with Dr. Colwell, of BR 135 in its second edition, produced in 2003, yes?
Yes.
And we know that the purpose of this programme was in order to inform that next edition, yes?
Yes.
Can you explain, given that that was the role, why you weren't involved, as you say, from the very earliest time, at least familiarising yourself with what it was that was to be tested?
The test programme was something that Dr. Colwell was focused on. I would have been working on other projects.
When was it first proposed that you would be a co-author of the second edition of BR 135?
I assume it's in the contract documents to say that I was one of the team that would contribute to that. In terms of being a listed author, I think that was probably decided when the document was completed.
Right. Well, at what stage were you aware that you were going to be involved in assisting in writing it, whether or not your name appeared on it? Presumably it was before July 2000, no?
I'm not sure.
Now, if we go then to BRE 30418882, what I'm showing you here is the client report prepared for Anthony Bird, dated the 19th of September 2002. And it's called Analysis of ISO 9705, European and British Standard Fire Test Data for BR 135 project. All right, now that is what has been called the analysis report. If you go to page 2, we can see again that it was prepared by Sarah Colwell and approved by Dr. Debbie Smith, yes?
Yes.
Did you have any involvement in this report?
Not that I remember.
Right. Now, if we look at well, did you ever see it? I mean, it came to the department, as we can see, on the 19th of September 2002. Did you see it when it came through?
I can't remember.
Did Anthony Bird ever show it to you? Did he discuss it with you? Did he ask you about it?
Again, I don't have any recollection of it at the moment.
Right. Let's go to page 5 and let's see how we go. Page 5, introduction. It tells us there that 14, in the second paragraph, as part of the review process, 14 full-scale fire tests were undertaken using the Fire Note 9 test methodology. The results from this work are presented in BRE Report 209169 Revision 1. The systems identified and tested at full scale were also assessed at intermediate and bench scale using the following test methods. And then there are 5 of them set out. The first 2 are BS476, parts 6 and 7 respectively, and the last 3 are part of the European 13501 test suite, aren't they?
Yes.
Yes. And if you, let's go then to the 14 full-scale tests. We know from other documents that the tests were carried out at various times between the 31st of May 2001 and the 14th of November 2001, but occasionally more than one test was carried out. Does that sound about right to you?
It sounds plausible, I think.
Right, well, yes, of course it does, but does it trigger a recollection?
No.
Right. Were you present at any of these tests?
No.
Now, Sarah Colwell tells us in her oral evidence, day 232, page 82, lines 13 to 23, that you would have been present for at least some of these tests. Do you disagree?
I can't remember. I may have witnessed 1 or 2. I don't know.
Right. Well, you said a moment ago you weren't present at any of these tests, and now you You say you can't remember, you may have witnessed one or two. Doing the best you can with your
I've seen a lot of fire tests over the years. I don't particularly remember witnessing these. If Dr. Caldwell thinks I attended some, I may have done, but I don't remember.
Right. Do you remember, can you help, whether Debbie Smith attended them? Do you remember watching a fire test in 2001 with Dr. Smith standing next to you?
And these are mostly small-scale tests, so I'd be surprised if Dr. Smith would have had time to witness one of those.
Well, no, true, but it also says that the systems identified and tested at full scale were also assessed at intermediate and bench scale. So they were both done, full scale, fire note 9 tests and the bench scale tests. So my question is about the full scale tests. Do you remember standing underneath a rig in the burn hall at Garston with Dr. Debbie Smith and watching one of these tests?
I think at the time, if the full-scale tests would have been carried out at the large building test facility in Cardington, which is a good sort of hour and a half's drive from Garston.
Well, do you remember going there and watching a test?
I don't think I ever did see a full-scale cladding test at Cardington.
Right. Let's go to a different document. We're going to jump between these two for a short time. This is a document called the Closing Report at BRE 30411895. You can see from the first page it's dated the 16th of September 2002. And it's called the ADPM Closing Report, Review of Fire Performance of External Cladding Systems and Revision of BRE Report BR135, prepared for Anthony Bird. And as I say, it's dated 3 days before the analysis report we've just looked at, 3 days beforehand. Looking at this, did you have any involvement in compiling this report?
I doubt it. I don't remember it.
If we go to page 2, we can see that it was prepared for Anthony Bird, again by Dr. Colwell, and again approved by Dr. Debbie Smith. And if we go to page 9, please, we can see the list of the 14 full-scale tests carried out with a description of the main components of the systems used in each test. Now, are you able to help us why it is that the specific products there aren't identified by reference to the product name or manufacturer?
It was a common practice when doing work for the department to avoid making reference to specific manufacturers in reports.
But is it the case that the information was nonetheless known at the BRE, even though not reflected in the document sent to the department?
I assume so.
You assume so. So that would be normal practice, would it?
Yes, well, it would have been BRE that obtained the material, so you assume somebody had a record of what they were.
Right, and how and where was that information recorded?
I don't know. Whoever was procuring it probably had the information to hand, but as I say, it was common practice not to put that into publishable reports.
You say whoever was procuring it. We know that Dr. Colwell took the lead in producing this report. Can we assume then, on the basis of the way things normally work, that she would have had that information collated and stored somewhere?
At that time, she would have had that information, yes.
And where would it have been kept? On what system? In what filing? Do you know?
Probably in a paper file somewhere, I expect.
Do you know who designed the test rigs for the full-scale tests done at Cardington?
No.
Do you know who approved the designs?
No, I don't know.
Do you know who installed or built the systems?
I don't know.
Did you play any part in the design at any stage?
No.
Now, the full-scale tests that were carried out were done in accordance with the Fire Note 9 methodology, and I put that to you, but is that correct to the best of your understanding?
That's my understanding, yes.
Let's go back to the analysis report then, BRE 30411882, page 23. If we go to that page, we can see a Table 8, which is a full summary of full-scale test results. And if we look at the 14 tested systems, they're listed, and the results for each are in the far right-hand column. You can see where it says Fire Note 9 pass-fail. You see that?
Yes.
I think it may be underneath the thumbprint on your top right-hand corner, but
yes,
that is the list. And you can see a lot of failures there and a couple of passes as you go down the column. And if you look at the last column there, that you can see that 3 of the 14 tests resulted in a pass. There's the two render systems, items 4 and 5, yes? Expanded polystyrene core.
Yes.
And rock-wool core with an acrylic render coat. And then one of them under the composite panel systems, item 4, rock-wool core, built-up system, no fire barriers, also passed, yes?
Yes.
All the others failed, didn't they?
Yes.
Yes, you can see that. Now, so we take it from that two of the systems which passed were in set 2 render systems. And that's self-explanatory, isn't it?
Yes.
And only one from set 3, the composite panels, yes?
Yes.
But none under the rain screen system tests. They all failed, all of them.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, to showing you that, let's then go back to the closing report for the department, the report 3 days before, 16th September 2002, BRE 30s41895, page 9. Having shown you the tabulated results of the full-scale tests, let's look at some of the systems that were tested. Page 9 here is Table 1, Initial Experimental Programme, and here we have, in Table 1, under the heading Rain Screen Systems, we have Set 2. And if you look at Item 5, it says aluminium sheets mounted on aluminium rails, no fire barriers. Now, I'm quite sure you won't be able to tell me the name of the aluminium sheet product. Am I right about that?
That's correct.
And am I also right that you can't tell us the name of the manufacturer?
That's correct.
But am I also right in thinking that Sarah Colwell, on the systems that were used at the time, did know it at the time and had that detail in her documents?
I would expect so.
You would expect so. Now, did you appreciate at the time, or had you seen this at the time, you would have appreciated that these panels were aluminium panels with a polyethylene core?
At the time, I don't think I did appreciate that.
Right. It's one of the types of panels referred to in the literature review that we looked at, isn't it? Taken from the typical
Yes.
cladding costs from the Architect's Journal. Now, let me try it differently. Dr. Smith and Dr. Colwell both accepted that these were indeed aluminium composite panels with a polyethylene core. Anthony Bird couldn't remember, but he didn't deny it. That's the effect of their evidence, and I'm summarising it very broadly. Would you, or are you able to disagree with that?
I don't disagree with it.
No. And you could see on its face that these are not pure aluminium, are they? Have a core of some kind.
From this document we're looking at now,
Yes.
it just says aluminium sheets.
Well, it does. Let's go to page 10. Table 1 there, item 5. I'm so sorry. We need to go. My fault. BRE 30s41882. Which is the document we were looking at before. And there's the experimental programme there, and it's Table 1, and if you look down at Item 5 under rain screen, it says aluminium/polyethylene core sheets on aluminium railings. So you can see from that that these are not pure aluminium, they have a polyethylene core. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And now if we go to BRE 30s41909, we have a blank tabulated summary for all of the testing results. There it is. And again, you can see fifth item down, aluminium/polyethylene core sheets on aluminium railing. Now, I've shown you that. So taking it in stages, first, I don't think you can deny that this was an ACM panel with a PE core, which was part of the test. Yes?
Appears to be, yes.
That's what the document showed.
Yes.
That is what Dr. Smith and Dr. Colwell accepted. Did you know that at the time? Did you see this report at the time? Did you see that an ACM product with a polyethylene core was subjected to this test, full-scale test?
The only thing I can remember of that test is Dr. Colwell coming into the office after having carried out the test and showing me a piece of the material she'd tested. Right.
And you say she came into your office after the test?
Yes.
Was that the same day as the test?
I don't remember.
So the test was at Cardington, and your office was at, when you weren't at government, was at Garston, was
Yes.
it? And so she came, just talk me through it. You can remember this, can you? She came into your office and showed you, what did she show you?
What I don't know what I was working on at the time, but I was working on something. Sarah walked into the office and showed me a small piece of material, which I now know to be ACM,
Right.
and said, "Look at this stuff. We just did a fire note 9 test on it, and she described the mechanism by which it reacted with the fire, i.e. the aluminium melted away, exposed the polyethylene, and then the polyethylene began to burn."
Did she tell you anything else about what she'd observed?
Not that I think she said that it failed the test.
Right.
That's as much as I remember.
Did she tell you how she felt about it in human terms?
Not that I recall.
Did she tell you she was shocked by what she saw?
My recollection is that the conversation was an interesting outcome.
An interesting outcome. All right. So, if not shocking, then it stood out. Can we put it that way?
Obviously, in the context of this inquiry, this sounds awful, but I think I should try and be as honest as possible. It was an interesting conversation.
Right.
That's what I recall.
Right. Well, did she report back to you and show you bits of other tests that had been done during this testing program, or is this the only instance that you can remember?
We would talk from time to time about Dr. Culwer would have been doing fire experiments and fire tests on lots of different tests on lots of different things. People would come in and out of the office at Garston regularly and talk about an experiment they just carried out. And so it wasn't unusual for someone to talk about a test they just carried out.
Did she give you the impression that what she had seen was shocking or surprising or noteworthy, to use a more neutral expression?
That's not the impression I remember having at the end of that conversation.
Did she tell you that the test had to be terminated manually before 6 minutes?
If she did, I don't remember that.
Right. Did she tell you that the flames had not only reached the top of the rig, but had doubled it and gone up to 20 metres in height?
I don't remember her saying that.
Did she tell you that she thought that the burn hall might have been put at risk?
Test wasn't carried out in the burn hall, it was carried out at Cardington.
Cardington, right.
Cardington's an enormous space.
Yes, but did she tell you, you're right. Did she tell you that? Did she tell you that there were risks to the environment presented by what she had observed at the test?
I don't remember that.
Right. Can we go to BRE 30 41912? Now, we'll have to scroll, I think, to the left-hand side of this to see the results. Yeah, thank you. Now, if you look, please, at the rain screen system in the middle there, row 15 under B, aluminium. Oh, sorry. Can we go back to where we were? Where, please? Thank you. Yeah. Row 15, aluminium. You see that? And if you look at the results across the page, you can see a number of the statistics there, but you can see that the time to external 600 degrees under column L was 3 minutes. You see that?
Yes.
And in the last column, termination at 5.75 minutes. Yes?
Yes.
And going back to column N, the insulation to 600 degrees at 4.34 minutes. Yes?
Yes.
Did you see those figures at the time?
I don't think I did.
Did Sarah Colwell tell you those figures, or tell you in outline terms technically what had happened during the test?
I don't remember ever doing that.
And looking at those figures, would you agree that the Fire Note 9 full-scale test as identified there, featuring aluminium with a polyethylene core, was a catastrophic and very rapid failure.
It's clearly very rapid. I'm not sure how you define catastrophic.
Well, Sarah Colwell's evidence is that she was shocked at the test. She said that those present were surprised and that this was a very rapid, very large fire growth. That is all at day 232, pages 97, 100, and 100. Anthony Bird also told us at day 239, page 49, lines 21 to 22, that the result was surprising. And would you agree that time to external failure, with being 3 minutes, was at its lowest surprising?
I suppose it's clearly it's more rapid than the other materials that were tested.
Did you not want to know why the test was terminated at 5.75 minutes?
I don't remember having that conversation because I don't remember seeing this data.
Right. I mean, did you know at the time, or did you get the feeling at the time, that here was a test observed by your colleagues which shocked them or at lowest surprised them, and on these figures would have demonstrated that the use of ACM with a polyethylene core with an iso-wool insulation caused an inferno?
At the time, I don't remember anyone discussing this as being a particularly unusual outcome. As I say, I wasn't heavily involved in the experimental side of this project, so I didn't. That didn't register with me at the time.
When she brought you the piece of ACM and told you about the test, what did you think her purpose was in doing so?
As I say, this does sound awfully glib given the circumstances, but at the time it was an interesting outcome. I'm not even sure if I recall this being part of this programme.
Right.
I think she just said, "Look at this stuff that's come on, that we've been looking at," and say describe the mechanism by which the aluminium melted away and exposed the polyethylene.
Did you have any thoughts at the time along the lines of, well, we can't be having any of that above 18 metres in this country?
I honestly don't remember thinking much more about it. I think I assumed that was, I guess at the time I assumed that Sarah was dealing with it.
But nonetheless, she brought this to you because you were the ADB man, so to speak. What did you think her purpose of bringing this to you was, other than to alert the ADB man to the result?
At the time, it felt like a conversation amongst colleagues about an interesting result.
Well, it's more than interesting, isn't it? This was a conflagration, a 20-metre fire. You may not have known that, but given her reaction as she's told us, and given the fact that she chose to discuss it with you, can you really not tell us anything more than it was an interesting conversation?
No, as I say, it sounds awful now, and
All right.
but that's honestly the only recollection I have of that test was that short conversation.
Do you remember? Well, let's show you a little bit more to see if it triggers anything else. Can we go, please, to BRE 30 is 41991, I think. And if we go within that to page 3. No, okay, I know what's gone wrong. BRE 30 is 41911, not 41991. This is a different document. Thank you, that's it. And if we go to page 3 in this, please, we can see in page 3, rain screen 3, aluminium plus iso-wool on metal. And here is the chronology of the test. And some of this I've shown you before, but you can see that at 3 minutes and 5 seconds, molten aluminium drops off front face. At 4.08, flame reaches front level 2 TCs, thermocouples. 4:20, flame reaches top of rig. 5 minutes, flame approximately twice height of rig, 20 metres. 5:45, crib doused. And 7 minutes, front and wing faces extinguished. Do you remember Sarah Colwell telling you anything of this? The molten aluminium dropping off the front face, the flame reaching front level 2 thermocouples at 4 minutes and 8 seconds or so, 20 metres at 5 minutes. Any of that?
No, as I say, all I can remember is her talking about this mechanism of the aluminium melting away and exposing the polyethylene. I don't remember her mentioning what's clearly quite a significant incident, which is the flames doubling the height of the rig.
Right. Do you remember any discussion about the fact that with molten aluminium dropping off the front face, you had a new mechanism for downward fire spread or mechanical failure leading to danger to those standing below it?
No.
Mr. Millett, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I've got one eye on the clock, and I wonder whether we ought to be having a break about this time.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's right. I've got about a page and a half to get to the end of the topic, but I'm very happy to take the break now.
But if it's not too inconvenient, I think otherwise the second half of the morning will become
Indeed.
unreasonable. Yeah. Right, we'll take the break now. Mr. Martin, I think it's time we all had a break, so we'll stop there. We'll resume, please, at midday. And while you're out of the room, please, as before, don't talk about your evidence or anything relating to it to anyone else. All right?
Yes, sir.
Right, thank you very much. Well, if you'd like to go with the usher, we'll see you at midday then, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Millett. Midday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Mr. Millett, if you're ready, perhaps we could invite the usher to ask Mr. Martin to come back into the room.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. May we please have Mr. Martin back? Thank you.
Mr. Martin, you all ready to carry on, I hope?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Millett, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Martin, two pieces of evidence which have been given to us during the course of the inquiry. First, Sarah Colwell told us, day 232, page 100, lines 16 to 21, that she couldn't see that ACM would be an appropriate product for use on high-rise buildings. Now, did you discuss that topic with her at the time? And when I say at the time, at any time in between May 2001 and mid-September 2002?
No.
Debbie Smith told us, day 235, page 11, lines 7 to 13, that ACM with a PE core should never, ever be used on tall buildings. Did you discuss that topic with Dr. Smith at any time between May 2001 and mid-September 2002?
No.
Not at all?
Not that I remember.
Did you consider yourself, by September 2002, that the use of aluminium composite material panels with a polyethylene core on a high-rise building would present anything other than a grave risk to occupants in the event of a fire?
It was not something that I gave any consideration to at the time.
And can you just explain why that is so?
The opportunity never arose to have that consideration. As I say, the only knowledge I had of this material was a 5-minute conversation with a colleague following the test. I guess at that point it was clear that it failed the test, and the view was it was therefore inappropriate for use on a high-rise building, but I never gave it any more consideration after that point.
No, you say you never gave it any more consideration after that point. We're going to come later in your evidence to look at BR 135, but is what you're telling us that at no time before BR 135 in its second edition was published in 2003, only a year or so after this report, that you didn't consider that question, the question of the safety of the use of ACM with a polyethylene core panel, yourself or with colleagues?
It's not something that I discussed with anybody.
Or just never cropped up, notwithstanding these results?
I can see why you'd ask me that question, but I can only answer honestly, which is it's not something that I considered.
Now, we've seen that not a single one of the 5 rain screen systems tested under Fire Note 9, the full tests, passed those tests. Did you know that at the time?
I don't remember it being discussed, but it seems likely that I might have known.
Yes. I mean, how could you have written or contributed to BR 135 without knowing that?
I think my recollection of the drafting work that I did on BR 135 was to talk through with Dr. Colwell what issues we needed to address in the guidance, and we discussed different ways of trying to present that.
So does that tell us that the failure of all 5 rain screen panels and what I might put as the shocking failure of the rain screen panel with ACM with a PE core simply didn't come up for discussion while you were preparing BR 135 the next year?
It sounds hard to believe, but that's right.
It does sound hard to believe. Yes. Now, we know from the reports that only 2 of the 14 systems tested included fire barriers. Do you know why that was?
No.
Do you remember that one of the stated objectives of this contract was to understand the contribution of any fire stopping present within the cladding systems? We saw that in the bid document, 23rd of December 2000. Do you remember that? Sorry, 1999. Do you remember that? Yes. So if we go back to the analysis report, 19th September, BRE 30418882, please, page 3, paragraph 7. At the foot of the page, it says that, paragraph 7, the full-scale test was the only method which satisfactorily assessed the system performance, including detailing such as fire barriers. Now, that's one of the BRE conclusions from the project, as we can see. Did you have any part to play in coming to that conclusion or drafting that paragraph there?
I knew that was the conclusion that Dr. Colwell had come to on the basis of the work that they'd done.
Right. It's right, isn't it, in fact, that's just a statement of reality, which is that bench tests and intermediate scale tests can't, because of their nature, assess the performance of cavity barriers. Only a full-scale test can do that.
I guess in terms of fire barriers, it's the interaction between the fire barrier and the rest of the cladding system is what you need to understand. Yeah. You can test the fire resistance of the fire barrier in isolation, but it doesn't really tell you how it would impact on the actual fire spread in the system as a whole.
No, but I mean, what I'm putting to you is that paragraph 7 is not a conclusion that you needed to reach as a result of testing. It's a statement of the obvious, isn't it? You don't need data or a test program to tell you what's said there.
I suspect there would be people that would have argued differently.
Well, do you know as a fact whether there were?
I don't remember at the time, no.
Do you know? Can you explain how the full-scale test method satisfactorily assessed detailing such as fire barriers in circumstances where only 2 of the full-scale tests carried out contained any?
I can't answer that question.
Now, at this time, this is 19th of September 2002. I showed you 2 reports, 16th and 19th. This is the analysis report of the 19th of September 2002. Now, at that time, the version of ADB in circulation, then current, was the July 2000 version, wasn't it? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And that stipulated that, as we've seen, I think, that the external surfaces of walls of buildings with a story over 18 metres were to achieve class 0. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. But class 0 is not a full system test, is it?
That's correct.
It's an intermediate or bench test.
Yes.
And it doesn't allow a satisfactory assessment of system performance, does it?
That's correct.
So, did the conclusion at paragraph 7 here not indicate to you in clear terms that the provisions in ADB were insufficient because the full-scale test was the only method which could satisfactorily assess the system performance?
I think that was BRE's position, that the only reliable way of assessing the system would be to test the system at full scale.
Yes, and that therefore class 0, by that very fact, would not do so. Yes?
Yes, or the linear route, for want of a better term, yes.
Or the linear route, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you agreed that at the time, did you? And you say this is BRE's position. You were an employee of the BRE and engaged on this, or at least in part, on this project.
Yes, so that was the view of my employing organisation was that the best option is to use a large-scale test.
Yeah, what was your view, personally?
I'm not sure if I had a view at that time, to be honest, but I think I tended to recognise that a large-scale test was the best option.
Well, you say you didn't have a view, or you're not sure. What were you doing there? What were you actually doing at the BRE?
Quite a wide range of different things.
Well, in relation to this project, CC 1924, this testing, what were you doing?
The testing, as I say, I didn't have an awful lot to do with the experimental programme on this part of the project. The drafting of BR 135, I was working with Dr. Colwell to try and find a way of translating findings into the guidance document that became BR 135.
When you say her findings, do you mean these two reports, the analysis report and the closing report, which contain her findings?
And the general conclusions there, yes.
You say and the general conclusion. So the answer to my question is yes.
Yes.
I see. Okay. Well, we'll come back to that later in a while. Before we do, can I ask you some questions about intermediate and bench scale tests? You told us you weren't present at and didn't carry out the full scale tests. Were you present at, or did you observe the carrying out of the small scale or bench scale tests? The intermediate and bench scale tests, I'm sorry.
I don't remember. I've seen a number of those types of tests carried out over the years. I don't recall seeing the ones specifically related to this project, but I may have done.
If we stick in this document, please, this is the 19th of September 2002 analysis report, and go please to page 11. We can see a heading, BS 476, Part 6 and 7, under the heading at the top of the screen, Results. And it says, the results from BS 476, Part 6 and 7 are presented in Table 2. The results from these tests were not as expected, with only 4 of the 11 products achieving Class 0. All of the materials tested were believed to be Class 0 products when purchased for this project. You see that? Now, just focusing on what is said there, not as expected. We know that it was the BRE who had bought the products through a third party and then invoiced the department for them. Did you know that?
No, but that's not unusual
Right.
approach. That seems reasonable.
If we go to page 12, we can see the data which reflects the results in the final column of the table, and you can see N and Y under the heading Class 0. Can you see the final heading there, Class 0, or is it obscured by the thumbprint?
It's slightly obscured, but
Right,
I
okay.
accept that's what it says.
All right.
I can see it now.
Yes, thank you. And you can see Y and N, yes and no, respectively. Apart from being unexpected, just looking at that, what do these results tell you?
Well, it looks like something that ought to be looked into as to why quite a lot of these apparently Class O products weren't Class O.
And did you consider that at the time? Did you wonder about that at the time?
No, I don't remember seeing this data.
Right. Let's just work out the possibilities. One possibility is that 7 of 11 companies were not telling the truth about their product classifications. That's one possibility. Did that occur to you at the time?
No, because I didn't see this data at the
Okay,
time.
all right. If we go to page 19, then first paragraph, headed Class 0, it says, the results from BS 476 Part 6 and 7 tests were expected to confirm the Class 0 performance of the products used in this project. As the results show, all the materials achieved the required performance levels in the fire propagation test, BS 476 Part 6, but a significant number did not achieve the required surface spread of flame classifications. There does not appear to be any one reason for this lack of performance. Do you remember what the reasons were from which no one particular factor could be picked out as the cause?
No.
Do you remember when you first saw these results?
I think in preparation for coming to the inquiry.
Well, so what, not in preparation to do one BR135?
I certainly don't remember them.
Right. Do you remember anything about what Anthony Bird's reaction was when receiving these conclusions and this discussion? Here you have 11 purportedly Class 0 products which fail the Part 7 test in significant numbers for various reasons. Do you not remember anything about a discussion about that within government?
No, I don't.
Or about the implications? No?
No, I don't.
Do you remember whether anyone contacted the manufacturers to ask them or to tell them that their alleged Class 0 products had failed significantly to meet Class 0?
I don't remember any of this, I'm afraid.
Trading Standards, Advertising Standards Authority, did anybody contact them? Do you remember?
Nope.
Right. So as far as you remember it, this was a conclusion which did not trouble the government or the BRE, as far as you know, in any way.
I would expect it to have been something that was discussed, but I don't have any recollection of it. It may be that they discussed it without me being there.
Now, one of the 4 products, did you know this, that one of the 4 out of the 11 products which did achieve Class 0, Mr. Martin, was the ACM panel with a polyethylene core? Did you know that?
I know that now. I'm not sure I knew that at the time.
Right. Well, let's just look at page 11, back to page 11, under the first paragraph under rain screen panels. And it says that the aluminium cladding panels achieved a Class 0 performance when tested to BS 476 Part 6 and 7. Both their performance in the fire propagation test and the surface spread of flame test showed that they fully met the requirement of this classification. Now, given the disastrous performance of that product at full scale, which I put to you, 20-metre flames, termination at 5.75 minutes, do you remember seeing these results or hearing about them with surprise?
No, I mean, this is something I've thought about, as you might imagine, over certainly the last few months. I've heard other people's evidence. I still find it hard to understand why it wasn't something that was discussed to a higher degree, but I don't have any recollection of it at all.
And when Dr. Colwell came to you after the disastrous performance of the ACM polyethylene core panel in the full-scale test and showed you what had come off the test, was there any discussion about the fact that it was nonetheless a Class 0 panel, or at least that the manufacturer had claimed Class 0 for it? Do you not remember any conversation like that?
I'm not sure. I don't think I remember
Right.
that conversation.
Do you remember any conversation along the lines of how it could be the case that although the aluminium sheeting system achieved the poorest classification in both tests, it was the only one, or the only product to achieve Class 0 in the British standard tests? Do you remember no discussions about that at all?
I still don't understand why that's the case, but that's my. I can only tell you what I remember, I'm afraid.
You see, as the ADB man, do you accept that this would have been critical information for you to receive because you needed to interpret it, translate it, to use your own words, and take it back to government so as to know whether or not a change needed to be made in the next edition, if not before the next edition, of Approved Document B?
I think I agree. I just don't understand why it wasn't given the prominence that it clearly deserved, given the results. But at the time, it wasn't something that came to my attention with that degree of prominence.
What, did it come to your attention at all?
I don't think it did. All I can remember is this short conversation with Dr. Colwell.
I mean, you really can't think of a single reason why neither Mr. Bird nor Miss Colwell, Dr. Colwell, as I think she had become by then, maybe she hadn't, would keep this from you and not say to you, look, Brian, this has catastrophically failed the Fire Note 9 test, and yet it's got Class 0. We really need to think about whether Class 0's safe and have another look, perhaps, at the Select Committee's recommendation. Now, can you think of any good reason why that conversation wouldn't have happened?
No, it's something I've given a lot of thought about, and I don't really understand why that didn't happen.
I mean, would you agree with this proposition now that these results suggest in clear terms, looking at the pieces of paper we've been looking at, that it would be dangerous to allow National Class 0 to be used on buildings as a standard for assessing fire performance above 18 metres?
Certainly if you were using Class O in isolation, yes.
Well, we'll come back to the qualification in isolation in due course, because I'm interested in what you say about that. But I think but subject to that, you agree. And I think that would mean that if evaluated only on the basis, well, let me try again. PE called aluminium products could never have been deemed suitable, adequate, to use the word, for use on a building above 18 metres, if evaluated only based on the Euro classes either. Because it would only get a B, or D, actually.
I think
D.
it is. You need to recognise that the core material is a key component of the behaviour of the product.
And yet, would you agree that if evaluated based on the national classification system alone, looking at diagram 40, an ACM with a PE core, because it gets class 0, was considered suitable for use on buildings of any height? Yes?
I think at that time that would have been the case.
Yes, and therefore used on high-rise buildings in apparent compliance with the provisions of approved document B at the time.
It would have met the approved document, it wouldn't have met the functional requirement, yes.
And do I take it from your answers thus far that neither you nor to your knowledge anyone in government or anyone at the BRE ever considered that the national reaction to fire classifications should be withdrawn in relation to external walls of high-rise buildings because they were risky?
Not in those terms. I mean, as I say, the BRE's view was the most appropriate way to test a cladding system was at large scale.
And what would be the point of having something that meets the approved document but doesn't meet the functional requirement? What is the point of diagram 40 then? At least applicable to this product.
But I think that's the point I'm making, is you need to consider what's below the surface, which is what subsequent editions of the approved document were trying to do.
Oh, what's below the surface is a polyethylene core, Mr. Martin.
Yes.
What is on earth, may I ask you, is the point of permitting this through diagram 40 above 18 metres in circumstances where it would not meet the functional requirement?
I don't think that's a thing that you'd want to do.
But no, indeed, but it was, because the July 2000 version, and indeed all versions up to 2018 of diagram 40, resolutely permitted a class 0 product to be used above 18 metres. And what was the point of that if a class 0 product would include an ACM panel with a PE core, which would never meet the functional requirements?
Well, subsequently, the class 0 was not used in isolation.
I see. Now, I just want to ask you one or two questions about the BSI and the IAG, see if you can help us with that. Can we go, please, to BRE 30420045? This is a document entitled Generic Data Supporting the Revision of BR 135, prepared for the Industry Advisory Group for the Revision of BR 135 and the Joint Working Group of BSI Technical Committees, FSH 21.7 and FSH 22.7, for the fire performance of cladding systems. And it's dated the 26th of June 2002. So about 3 months before the closing report and the analysis report we've seen for mid-September 2002 that was sent to Mr. Bird. Do you remember seeing this document at the time?
I don't remember it, no.
If we go to page 3, we can see the contents, introduction, summary of generic test data, and then ventilated cavity systems, render systems. Yes, you see that?
Yes.
Now, that only lists, as you can see, 5 tests under ventilated cavity and 5 tests under render systems. The composite systems are omitted altogether and aren't dealt with, take it from me, anywhere in this report at all. Can you explain why not?
No.
Have you seen, when did you first see this report? Have you ever seen this report?
I have no recollection of ever seeing it.
Right. Can you think of a reason why you wouldn't have seen it at the time, given that it comes from the BRE and goes to the IAG?
I think it would have been something that had been collated by Dr. Colwell and sent direct to the IAG. It's conceivable I might have been copied into it.
Well, it's not just conceivable. Given that you were one of the authors of BR 135, is there any conceivable reason why you wouldn't have been copied into it?
There's no reason why I wouldn't have been.
No. Right. If we go to page 5, you can see that there's a table of generic test data for the ventilated cavity and the render systems there. And you can see under the third item down, ventilated cavity, there's a word, aluminium, under external finish. Do you see that?
Yes.
And at page 8, under system 3, those are described there as aluminium-based cladding panels. Can you see at the top of the screen?
Yes.
Do you know why they are described in that way, aluminium-based cladding panels?
I can assume it's the consistent policy of avoiding directly describing a particular manufacturer's product.
Well, why not say aluminium skinned with a polyethylene core cladding panels? That wouldn't identify the manufacturer.
I agree, and that would have been more helpful.
Was there some delicacy, perhaps, about identifying with any greater degree of precision this product?
Not that I'm aware of.
I mean, do you accept that, on one view, that description is misleading because it does not identify the fact that these panels had a polyethylene core?
I agree. It's unhelpful.
Did it occur to you at the time that that description might lead a reader to conclude that the cladding panel was composed throughout of aluminium?
I don't remember seeing this report.
To make a proper assessment of or comparison of the performance of different systems, the reader of this report would need to know, wouldn't they, that the aluminium-based panels in fact had a polyethylene core?
I agree.
And did that occur to you at the time?
No, I don't remember seeing it.
Were any members of the IAG, other than government, or of the BSI Joint Committee actually told that these panels were ACM with a polyethylene core?
I don't know.
Is there any reason you can think of why they wouldn't have been?
I see no reason not to have told them. I'm surprised nobody asked why this system was behaving in the way it did.
Was there any reason why that information would be withheld on the face of the document then?
Not that I can think of. I think it would have been fine to describe it generically as a composite panel with a polyethylene core.
Was there any discussion that you remember at the time about the test results for the system incorporating what are described here as aluminium-based panels?
No, I don't remember.
Was there any discussion at the BRE, within the BRE to your knowledge, about whether any steps needed to be taken, for example, by government to address the dangers which had been revealed by that test?
Not to my knowledge.
Did nobody at the IAG or the BSI committee raise the suggestion that national class naught should not be used as the standard for fire performance of the external walls of high-rise buildings, given what this at least suggested?
No, and again, I find it hard to understand how, as I understand it, this report was circulated to quite a large group of people. It was the IAG and a series of standards committees. And no one had picked up that there's this, what you might call an outlier, a system that was behaving very differently to the others.
But one reason might be that the presence of polyethylene was concealed from them.
Knowing what I know now, if I saw this report now, I would be asking the provider of the report, if it's aluminium and glass wall, what is it that's burning? That would be the question that would come to my mind.
Well, you were on the IAG, I think, weren't you?
I knew a lot less about the subject than I do now.
Why were you on the IAG then?
As part of the project team.
Right. Part of the project team, but not part enough of the project team to ask the BRE what this was, why it was there, or explore it with Anthony Bird.
Not at that time, no.
And yet you were the person with Sarah Colwell who was going to write the revision to the BRE. Why the incuriosity, Mr. Martin?
I don't remember seeing it.
Well, I know, but why the incuriosity? Why not find out what the tests were, what had been done, and what had been shown by them, given that you were going to write not just a publication, but a publication that was going to be referred to as the standard the standard in the next edition of Approved Document B itself?
I think at the time I'd left the experimental side of the project was something that Dr. Colwell was dealing with. She explained to me what the generic findings were, and I worked with her to try and produce a guidance document that addressed that.
Can we then move to the conclusions and recommendations in the analysis report back to the 19th of September 2002, just a month or 3 months after this document? This is back at BRE 30418882, page 24. We've already looked at conclusion 7 on that page. I don't need to go back to that with you, but can we look, please, at paragraph 5 here? You can see there that it says the aluminium sheet. I'm so sorry. Item 2, the aluminium sheet product satisfied Class 0 requirements, but in the full-scale, intermediate scale and single burning item test proved to be one of the worst performing products. Now that follows, doesn't it, from what we saw before in this report?
Yeah.
Yes? Yes. Was that not something that you and Anthony Bird had a conversation about when he got this report on the 19th of September?
No.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, I would have remembered it, I'm sure.
And was that not a conversation that you had with Dr. Colwell at any time before putting your name to BR135 the following year?
No.
Really? Let's go to the closing report then. BRE 30418895, page 13, paragraph 5, which links to what I've just shown you. The aluminium sheet product satisfied Class 0 requirements, but in the full-scale, intermediate scale and single burning item test proved to be one of the worst performing products. As the current guidance in Approved Document B asks for Class 0 performance in Diagram 40, these issues may require further consideration. Now, let's be clear. Whatever your role in this project was, it was at least to be the ADB man, yes, to interpolate the results and put them into regulatory language, yes?
Yes.
Yes. And therefore you would have been interested, if in nothing else, then in this conclusion here at paragraph 5, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Can you explain why all this says is that this may require further consideration? That's all.
No, I can't. It probably needed, well, it clearly needed to be raised in stronger terms, I think.
Yes, but why wasn't it?
I don't know.
I mean, given that the test resulted in, as we can see from the figures, a catastrophic full-scale failure, twice the height of the rig before 6 minutes, and yet achieved Class 0, one of only a handful to do so, why was this recommendation expressed in such feeble terms?
I don't know.
I mean, what's the slight sense, Mr. Martin, here, that there's some sort of problem about coming clean with government and telling them that Class 0 was a problem. Diagram 40 is a problem and it's dangerous because once some products which achieve Class 0 are tested to full scale, they are dangerous, spectacularly so. And that's the sense one gets. Is there anything in that?
No. I don't believe anyone at the department or anyone at BRE would have deliberately concealed this, and I can't think of any reason why either group of people would have wanted to do so.
Well, the sense of the last sentence there is along the right lines, isn't it? Government needs to rethink Class 0, but it doesn't spell out, does it, in clear terms to government that if they don't review Class 0 in Diagram 40, people might die. And what I want to know, what we all want to know, is why doesn't it do that, given the results of the test?
I wish I had a better answer, I don't know.
Was there any follow-up by government in response to the advice that the issues may require further consideration?
I don't remember any.
Did you find out whether the department was going to give that matter further consideration, or did you just leave it to the department?
I don't remember giving it any consideration at the time.
Did you not even try to find out what the department thought about that recommendation, whether it had even moved the needle, whether it had come onto anybody's desk?
I think if I'd fully understood what had happened in the large-scale test, I think I would have probably done so, but that's not something that I experienced, and so didn't do that.
Well, even taking the four corners of paragraph 5 here and nothing else, was this not something, was this not to you knowledge that you needed to make sure your colleagues at the government knew was on their desk and followed through?
I don't remember this paragraph specifically. My only what I generally recall, and I can't fix a time in that, is that any design advice needed to take account of the fact that Class O shouldn't be used in isolation. That's all I can remember from that time.
You see, just looking at the chronology, we've had the Select Committee and their recommendation. We've had it rejected. We've been through the harmonisation exercise. We've had the 2002 amendments to the 2000 version of ADB, and the deregulatory environment was a decade off into the future. What possible reason was there for government, in whose offices you sat half the week, not acting on the advice there, oblique though it may have been?
At that time, I don't think there would have been any reason not to act on it. And again, this sounds awful, but I think it just got missed. I don't understand how a result of that magnitude didn't get more prominence at the time. And so I don't think anybody that I was talking to recognised the need to do more.
I'm going to put 5 things to you, which are, by way of conclusion from the evidence we've looked at thus far, and I'll see if you accept them. Would you accept that, just on the documents, government knew by September 2002 as follows? First, that the national reaction to fire classification systems in general and Class 0 in particular were not able to detect the fire hazard associated with the use of some apparently common combustible rain screen cladding products. Yes?
Based on the available documents, yes.
Second, that despite being able to achieve a Class 0 reaction to fire classification according to the national classification system, ACM of the PE core presented a clear external fire spread hazard. Yes?
Yes.
And that a PE called aluminium rain screen cladding, thirdly, was likely to present a very real danger with respect to external fire spread at height. Yes?
Yes.
Fourthly, that Class 0 was not itself, therefore, a safe and appropriate classification to ensure that the functional requirement was met. Indeed, as you told us, you might have a Class 0 product but not meet the functional requirement. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And then finally, that government now knew, if it didn't know it before, that fire safety compliance testing was either flawed or not reproducible, or technical loopholes were being exploited by manufacturers to make false claims about fire safety.
I think that last conclusion may be going far.
How else to explain the claim for Class 0 on 11 products when only 4 obtained that classification?
I think that's more of a question about the repeatability of those tests, and I think it's a known problem with fire classification, is that repeatability can be a problem.
I follow. But then that would provide another reason why Class 0 was not necessarily safe and appropriate as a classification for use at height.
But equally applicable to almost any other classification. I think that's
Well, other than non-combustible, I suppose, which is what, of course, the Select Committee had recommended.
It's probably more repeatable, I would have thought.
Now, those at least 4 facts that you've agreed with, were any of those shared with industry or with building control or housing providers, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Now, it's right, I think, isn't it, that the detailed reports and data from this project have never, before this inquiry, been released into the public domain?
That's my understanding, yes. I think, as I say, they were circulated quite widely to the IAG and some standards committees, but they weren't published.
Do you know why not?
I'm not sure. My experience over the years in the civil service is that getting research published can often be a problem. It's something we've had difficulty with all the time I've been working in the department for various sort of procedural rules. My own view is that there ought to be a more rigid and prescribed system where government research is always published in the same way that government statistics are.
Do you know who decided that these reports and the data from this work should not be disseminated outside government and the BRE and perhaps the IAG to the extent that they saw them?
I'm not aware of anyone making that decision.
Did you yourself ever have cause to raise that question with Anthony Bird or Richard Harold at a later stage and suggest to them that things have developed such that now these results should be publicly disseminated so that the industry could understand precisely what they showed?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think I believed that they had been published because that was the normal practice would be to publish government research. So I probably assumed they were published.
You assumed they were published. Where? Why would you make that assumption?
The general policy is that all publicly funded research gets published. That's been the policy, as far as I'm aware, for some time. I probably didn't give it any thought, just assumed that information was in the public domain.
So is this right? You say that you assumed that they were published, did you?
I don't think I gave it any direct thought, but if somebody had asked me, I would have assumed they would be somewhere available.
What about after Grenfell? I mean, when Grenfell happened, had you forgotten about these tests?
I hadn't forgotten about them. I think at some point after Grenfell, I tried to track down the reports and couldn't find them. And eventually, several months after the fire, I think Dr. Smith found some records of them and shared them with us.
Right. And we may come back to that topic later. But are you able to explain why these test reports only came out during the course of this inquiry, as part of the inquiry's own investigations, and not earlier?
No, but it reflects my experience of trying to get research published in that it can be problematic.
Mr. Martin, are you able to give us an assurance that you and Anthony Bird did not sit on this data or your knowledge of it for the full 9 years that you were a full-time civil servant, hoping and praying fervently that it would never see the light of day?
I can assure you that neither of us would have done that.
Is there any innocent explanation for why this data was sat on between September 2002 and disclosure to the inquiry for phase 2?
Tragically, I think it just got forgotten and fell between the gaps.
How could it possibly have been forgotten given what it showed?
I've been asking myself that question for quite some time.
Slightly different point. During the course of this project, which ran from the testing ran from May 2001 and the reporting on it in September 2002, what was your understanding about whether the department would follow the Select Committee's recommendation in 1999 that all external cladding systems should be required to be either entirely non-combustible or tested to full scale?
My understanding is that the department had decided that fully non-combustible was unreasonably onerous.
Did you or any others at the BRE during the life of this project consider that it was a possibility that the recommendation of the Select Committee might be followed or implemented at some stage, or was it your view that the government had firmly shut its door on removing Class 0 and insisting that all external cladding systems should be entirely non-combustible or tested to full scale?
I'm not sure we discussed it at any point that I recall, but I think if you'd have asked me at the time, I think I would have said it's a decision that's been made and won't be revisited until there's a reason to review it.
And what would the reason to review it be?
If it came up in a technical review of Part B of the building regulation.
Right. Was it? Do you remember whether revisiting the Select Committee's recommendation was logged for further consideration when the next review of approved document B came round, as it did in and after 2004?
It wasn't something that was on our list of subjects to look at for the review that became the 2006 edition.
Does that tell us, therefore, that the decision made by government in the April of 2000 not to follow the Select Committee's recommendation, based as it was on evidence that it had heard, was final and effective and not thereafter ever again to be revisited?
I guess no government decision is final, but we would have only have revisited it in that review if the department had asked us to.
What would it have taken to get the department to ask you being the BRE, I take it, for this purpose?
So at that time when I was working for BRE and starting that review, if the department had said to us, this is one of the subjects we want you to look at, then we would have put it on the agenda.
Now I want to turn to BR 135, and I want to ask you about the revisions to BR 135 itself and the preparation of the second edition. Before we do, can we just look at some basics? You told us, and we know, and let's have it up on the screen so others can see it, that in 1992, the functional requirement was in absolute terms. Can we look at that, please? BLA 405482, page 72. And I'd like that on the screen there, if it can be expanded. Can we also have at the same time, please, CLG 16012, page 86. That's CLG 16012, page 86. Here it comes, I hope. Yes, thank you. Now, just to be clear, on the left-hand side of your screen, we have the 1992 version of the regulation. You can see that.
Yes.
1st of June 1992. And on the right-hand side, the version of the regulation as of the 1st of July 2000. And if you look at the left, under the heading External Fire Spread B4 sub 1, it says the external walls of the building shall resist the spread of fire over the walls and from one building to another, having regard to the height, use and position of the building. Yes?
Yes.
And on the right-hand side, although it's a bit dark, it says that the external walls of the building shall adequately resist the spread of fire over the walls and from one building to another, having regard to the height, use and position of the building. So the word adequately has gone in. Now, my question is, did you have any involvement in the changes to that wording?
No, but I remember it happening.
What do you remember?
I have a recollection speaking to an official in the department, and I think at some point the drafting lawyers that work on the drafting of the regulations had been concerned that there was an inconsistency in the way that the different functional requirements were written. Some of them included the term reasonable or adequately, and others were written, as you say, in more absolute terms. And the lawyers took the view that there should be a consistency and they should all include either the term adequately or reasonably.
Right. Did you have any particular understanding about what the word adequate connoted?
Well, insofar as the change, the intention was not to make any difference in the regulations could only require what was reasonable or adequate. So in terms of adding that word, it was just good drafting practice to use a consistent language in all of the functional requirements. And the term adequately and reasonably really relates to the way that functional requirements work.
Yes. Why? Why reasonably? Why adequately? Why not absolutely? Why shouldn't the external walls of the building resist the spread of fire, as opposed only adequately to have to do so? Are you able to help us with that?
I think you're reading more into it than was intended.
Well, I'm just reading the word on the screen, adequately. And I'm just wondering why you are telling us that, as you said, that the functional requirements work on the basis that the requirement is one of adequacy and reasonableness, as opposed to clarity and absolute outcome.
I'm probably not the right person to talk to you about the nature of legal drafting, but that was the conclusion that the department's lawyers had concluded.
Right.
And I think all of the safety-related provisions in Schedule 1 are all limited by, I think it's Regulation 8, which states that nothing can be required beyond what's reasonable to achieve. I think it's to achieve reasonable standards of health and safety. So the term reasonable effectively applies to all of the safety-related requirements, whether it says so within the requirement or not.
Right. Did you understand, just looking at the words on the right-hand side, once the word adequately re-enters the regulation, that the words having regard to the height, use and position of the building assist in defining or circumscribing what is, quotes, adequate, unquotes?
Yes, that's the intent. I mean, one of the problems I have with requirement B4 is that it addresses the two different facets of external fire spread in one paragraph. So that's fire spread between buildings and fire spread on the surface of buildings. So it's not entirely clear which of those two these different considerations are intended to apply to.
Well, it applies to, well, all right, we can argue about the wording.
Yes.
With other people, but does it tell us that if, as you understood it at the time, the word adequate was coloured, flavoured, if you like, by the words having regard to the height, use and position of the building, does that mean that what might be adequate resistance to external fire spread for a building used in one way might not be adequate for a building used in another way?
Yes.
So what is adequate, say, for an 18-metre building used to house Olympic athletes or an SAS crack unit might not be adequate for a 67-metre residential block which is home to many elderly or vulnerable people.
That's the general principle, yes.
Right. So is this right, then, that to your way of understanding, the guidance in ADB, which might presumptively satisfy or allow the satisfaction of Regulation B41 for one building, might well not do so for another? It all depends. Depends on the height, depends on the use, and depends on the position of the building.
Yes, ultimately, that's what the designers and the building control body should be considering.
Right. Did you always see Regulation 41 that way?
Yes, I think so, yes.
Right. So is this right, that it was always your view, right from the start of your career, or once you became familiar at least with Diagram 40, Class 0, Approved Document B more widely, and the functional requirement, that a Class 0 panel might be safe for one building, but unsafe for another building, depending entirely on its height, its use, and its position?
Yeah, I mean, that's a principle that I was taught as a trainee building control officer, is that you should always revert back to the functional requirement you understand the objectives that you're trying to meet when you're looking at the specifics of a particular building.
And do you agree that, well, rather, did you understand that the word adequate in the context of a stay-put policy or defend-in-place strategy should mean no flame spread?
I don't think I ever considered it in those terms. I think, as a building control officer, if I was presented with a design where there was some doubt over the external wall performance, I would have taken more care over a block of flats than I would have done an office building, I guess, is the best way I can describe how I might read that.
Right. And is that because any external flame spread on the exterior of a building invalidates the assumption that it's safe for residents not on the fire floor to stay in place, stay put?
I think you need to take that into account with the fact that if you've got a fully developed fire on one floor, the flames are likely to attack the next floor up, regardless of the construction of the external wall.
Well, it depends. I mean, would you accept this, that where a building had a stay-put policy in place and therefore its use could be described as a stay-put use, the only kind of fire spread over the walls of the building which would be adequate was none?
Well, that's impossible to achieve without having no windows. So there will always be some. If you get a fully developed fire, the flames emitting from the window are going to potentially attack the next floor up. And that's a matter of unavoidable fact.
That's the Coanda effect, isn't it? In part.
In part, yeah. Fire dynamics is a really complex subject.
Yes, it is. But that's not the same thing, though, is it? As the surface of the building on fire, is it?
That's right. Yeah, they're two different things.
Exactly, and therefore, where the surface of the building is not resisting the spread of fire at all, the use of a building where stay put is in place is endangered, isn't it?
I understand the point you're making. As a building control officer, I would have looked at the approved document to get an understanding of what the Secretary of State was looking for as a reasonable standard.
Well, yes, but given the assumption in any stay-put strategy that the flame won't spread beyond the compartment of origin, can we agree that any vertical flame spread across the facade, up or down, would undermine the provisions inherent within a stay-put policy, undermine the assumptions underpinning a stay-put policy?
Yes, it would negatively impact on the success of that strategy.
Yes, and was that something that was ever discussed at the time, to your knowledge, within the BRE or within the department or between the two organisations, government and the BRE?
Probably not in those terms. When we were looking at BR 135 and the design of the Fire Note 9 test, what the Fire Note 9 test, which eventually became BS 8414 test, is seeing is will the fire So if you accept that the flames from a fully developed fire will attack the next floor up, which they tend to because of the things we've just been talking about, the next question is, will it get to the next window? And that's what the Fire Note 9 test is trying to measure. So it's not an absolute no combustibility, but it's preventing the flames getting to that next window.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment for the break?
Thank you, Mr. Millett. Yes, I think it is. So, Mr. Martin, we'll stop at that point. Give us all a chance to get, and we'll resume, please, at 2:00. And as I've said to you before, please don't talk about your evidence or anything relating to anyone over the break. All right?
I understand.
Thank you very much. So we'll see you at 2:00. If we'd like to go with the usher, please.
That's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Millett. 2:00 then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.